I had freaking 6-pack abs, but at home I was bloated and my stomach was like looked 6 months pregnant. But as soon as I got to the gym, I sucked that shit in every picture I took. And you can see the inflammation and the bags under my eyes. I had diarrhea. I didn't have a period. Hi, team. Welcome back to another episode of The Wellness Effect. I'm joined today by the one, the only, the myth, the legend, Jensen Burns. Woohoo! And we are missing Kier today. She is on her little July family camping trip. So we're going to have a couple solo episodes without her, but that's okay. I'm sure she's living her best life, probably paddleboarding right now.
Yeah.
And on today's episode, me and Jeb are kind of talking about, what we're best at, how we kind of got into the industry, which is with macronutrients. So we're going to kind of bring you through just protein, carbs, and fat and why your macros might be the missing piece. And something that we hear just a lot from clients and from people who are thinking about joining the program, or even just people that we're talking to in the DMs is, they come to us and they always feel like they're doing everything right. They eat clean, they don't eat a lot, they're not overeating, they're working out, and they're still exhausted, they're still bloated every single day, their hair is still falling out, and they're just not seeing the scale move like maybe they want to. And what I really want you guys to all get out of this today is that it's probably not that you're eating too much, or that it's just that you're eating too little of the right things. Or honestly, sometimes it's even the opposite problem where you're eating enough by the numbers, but the quality of what's making up those numbers is kind of working against you. And so that's what we're getting in today, which is macronutrients. And I know it sounds like a word that you'd hear from some fitness influencer or me and Jensen era 2020, but we are going to kind of take a different approach. And I really want you guys to understand your body in a completely different way. And so this is not a diet episode. This is a finally understand what's actually happening inside you episode. And I'm excited because I think we have a lot of personal stories around getting into counting macros and what we thought was right for a long time and how that kind of ended up leading us down this crazy pathway of issues. So
Exactly.
we're going to just
Dive into
hop
it.
on into it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I think it's going to be cool that we're not taking it from a diet approach too, and actually just education, because so many people just don't know or understand macros. And if you can understand this one concept, it will make things like maintaining your weight, losing weight, gaining muscle, whatever that might be, or just feeling better overall so much easier. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So let's just quickly start with what macronutrients even are. And I never want anyone to kind of feel like you need some sort of nutrition degree to listen to this podcast. So I always like to try to just keep it simple and to the point. But macronutrients are just the three big categories of food that give your body energy and building blocks. So protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So I say macronutrients. So you want to think macros are in big, and then obviously we have the micronutrients, which are more vitamins and minerals, so small amounts. So macros we need in big amounts. That's why it's macro. And then micronutrients are things we need in small amount. That's why it's micro. So that's just kind of like an easy trick so you guys can remember the difference between macro and micronutrients. But the protein, carbs, and fats, that is what every single thing that you eat is made up of. So every meal, every snack, every smoothie, every slice of pizza is made up of some combination of those three things. Sometimes with fiber and water are along for the ride in there, but the core are protein, carbs, and fat. And here's the thing I really want you to hear is that your body needs all three, not just the good ones, not just protein, because everyone is always talking about protein and you don't want to just be eating low carb because someone told you that carbs are bad. You really, really do need all three of these macronutrients, and every single one has a very specific non-negotiable job in your body. And when one of them is missing, even if you don't realize it's missing, your body will feel it. And you might just be calling that feeling like I'm just tired, or I'm just stressed, or I'm just overwhelmed, instead of connecting it back to what you are eating on a daily basis. And so if you kind of think about it like you're building a house, protein is like the framing and the structure. Carbs are like the electricity, so the active, the moving energy source. And then fat is kind of like the insulation and the raw materials for a lot of those internal systems. And so you can't build a functional house with only one of those. You do need all three in the right amounts for your specific house. So that's kind of just the summary. But did that make sense, Jeb? Anything
It
to
did
add
make
there?
sense. Basically, macros big, micros little, protein, carb, fat.
Nailed
Boom.
it. Awesome. So now I'm going to go just into a little bit more about protein and hormone production and talk about that, because I do think although protein is definitely having and has had its moment for a few years now, I feel like that's easy for me and Jensen to say, but I think for a lot of people that's not actually common in their world. It's like everyone is talking about protein. So, protein, I think a lot of people think, okay, protein is for muscle and that's why I need it and it's good for building muscle. And although that is true, that really is just such a small piece of what protein actually does. And I think that's why so many women just dismiss it. They kind of think, like, I'm not trying to get too jacked or too muscular, so I don't need that much protein. But protein is literally the building block for your hormones, your neurotransmitters, which are like the chemicals that regulate your mood, your motivation, your ability to handle stress, and then also your enzymes, which run basically every single process in your body from digestion all the way down to detoxification. And so when we see women who are under eating protein, we're not really surprised when she tells us that she's like anxious or she's moody or her hair is thinning or her nails are breaking or her metabolism feels like it's slow. It's because her body or your body doesn't have the raw materials it needs to make what it needs to make. And it's not like some mystery or bad luck or aging or anything like that. That is chemistry, and your body is trying to build things, like I said, hormones, neurotransmitters, muscle tissues, immune cells. And if those raw materials aren't there, it is really hard. Like, it has to just choose one and pretty much prioritize, right? And so usually what gets deprioritized first are the things that feel optional in the short term, like hair growth or balanced mood, even though those are actual signs of like a much bigger problem underneath. Our body's not really thinking like, oh, she's going to die if she doesn't have long, beautiful, gorgeous hair, right? So it says like, I'm just not getting enough protein, so I'm just going to like cut that job off and we'll just continue moving on. And so that's another great example why you should never, ever, ever normalize any symptom ever, because that is a sign that you're either missing something or something is going on underneath the surface. And a lot of women, I think they're eating enough protein because, they'll have a protein bar or they'll start their day with a protein shake. And if you're still exhausted all the time, what we find is that most women usually get about a third of what their body actually needs across the day. And it's not that protein isn't working for them, it's that they're not actually getting enough of it to do its whole entire job.
Yeah. You need to be so intentional with protein. I think some people even, it's like, oh, I had an egg for breakfast. Or for so long, we grew up and people would say like peanut butter was a source of protein. And I'm sure there are still people that think that. But you have to be so intentional to hit those actual targets where you're going to feel amazing versus what the like World Health Organization recommends, which is I think like 1 per kilogram, which would put me at like 60 grams of protein. And that's just like to maintain, not like die essentially. What we actually need, and Lacey will go into this later in the podcast, is much different.
This episode of The Wellness Effect is brought to you by Lifestyle You. If you're listening to this podcast and thinking, okay, this sounds like me, whether it's low energy, hormone imbalances, stubborn symptoms, or you just feel like you've tried everything, Lifestyle You is our root cause coaching program designed to help you actually connect the dots.
We use functional nutrition, personalized support, and functional lab testing to figure out why your body is doing what it's doing, instead of just guessing or slapping a Band-Aid on symptoms.
And because you're a listener of The Wellness Effect, when you use the code Wellness Effect, you'll receive a free functional lab when you join the program. If this episode is resonating with you, make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe to the podcast, and check out the show notes to learn more about Lifestyle You and how to apply. But that is one point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make is the quality of protein also is so important. And so once again, I don't want to go too into this if you're going to talk about it more, but like the amino acid side of things and like plant-based versus like animal protein. Do you have that later in your
I can't remember.
I can't remember. But okay, well, I quickly I'm going to interrupt you because I think this is, and the reason it's on the top of my mind is I just started working with a vegetarian client, and you just have to be much more intentional when it comes to your protein sources. If you are vegetarian, we always recommend having good quality animal protein sources in your diet because it is so beneficial and will make your life so much easier, and you'll probably feel so much better. But the reason why is because when we look at like plant-based protein versus animal protein, the thing that's different between the two of them is the amino acid composition. And that's essentially what protein is made up of. Like Lacey said, we don't need to dive into that because it really doesn't matter when it comes to baseline information about nutrition. But what you do want to understand is like your quality and different types of protein is really important. It doesn't mean that plant-based protein isn't good for you. It's actually amazing. And it comes with so many other different of those micronutrients, but we need to be intentional with getting different sources of protein so we can hit all of those different amino acid targets, I guess, if you will. That's getting into the weed. The main thing you want to take away from that is quality of protein and different sources of protein.
Yeah, because you might have heard two people say, like, oh, this is a complete source of protein, which is most meats. And then people say, like, this is an incomplete source of protein, which is most, not all plant, but plant types of protein. And so, yeah, when it's complete, it means it contains all 9 of those essential amino acids that we do not produce that we do need. So obviously that is great. When it's incomplete, it just means it doesn't have all of those amino acids. And so a lot of times with vegetarians, they will actually have to pair certain plant protein sources together so that they hit all of those 9 essential amino acids. Because if they just ate tofu or if they
Or
just ate like
chickpeas.
beans, yeah, or chickpeas, you might be missing out on those essential minerals. And I don't think I go into this later on, so I'm glad that you brought this up. I think I more so just talk about like quality in terms of processed versus whole foods. But yeah, the amino acids with the protein is important. And so if you are a vegetarian, it's just worth doing a little bit of your own research to kind of see what is complete and what's incomplete and what are common food sources that you can pair together if you are kind of choosing that vegetarian life. But yeah, and then the other thing too, because I think a lot of women fall into this category, is you do have to like pay attention to the timing that you eat. Because if you eat almost no protein at breakfast and at lunch, and if you're that person that just skips breakfast, has a coffee, eats a small salad, and then you're eating like this big protein heavy dinner, and you think, oh, that's fine, I hit my protein. Yes, that's better than not hitting your protein at all, but your body still spent most of the day without the raw materials that it needed in real time. And like, if we think about it, during the day is when our brain is much more active, our bodies are much more active. And so we need that fuel consistently throughout the whole entire day. I think so many women are stuck in that cycle of just like a little bit under eating throughout the day and then maybe not binging, but like overeating at night to kind of like make up for those missed calories. And it's so backwards because at night, what are we doing? We're sitting on the couch, we're chilling, we're doom scrolling, we're not like using our brain or our body nearly as much as during the day. But that's when you're loading up your body with all of these resources. And so then your body just kind of gets confused. It doesn't know how to properly utilize it. And I find that's when women run into a lot of other health issues. So you just want to even make sure that you are spreading that protein across your meals and making sure that breakfast has a real protein source and lunch and dinner, and 30 to 35 grams per meal is like a great place to start. And just kind of the best thing that you can do for your health is probably eating and focusing on like having that protein in every meal.
Yeah, I agree. And something I was going to say with that too, and this is another tidbit because a client just brought it up to me and I'm like, that's such a good question, something that we don't think about because we've been in it for so long. But she was looking at her like meal guide and she was like, well, the target says 30 to 35 grams of protein. But then when I look at the chicken, it says 120 or 130 or whatever grams of protein. So which one is it? And when we look at like grams of food, and this is like another video on YouTube you can find, but of chicken, when you look at 140 grams of chicken and you measure that out on your scale, that doesn't equate to 140 grams of protein. And so I think a lot of people some people might hear that and think that sounds silly. Why would you think that? But it is a really common mistake, and like honestly makes a lot of sense why people would think that way. But what you really need to do is put in the input, and then you can see on these like macro trackers what that actual amount of protein is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I go into a little bit of like how many grams per gram of carb or protein or fat is equal to that later on. So that might help that what Jensen said make a little bit more sense. But I'll also go into this. But the best thing you can do is just track your food for 6 months. You guys are going to learn so much. But yeah, so that's kind of the gist with protein. And then the second one that I'm going to just talk about is carbs, because there's definitely a lot of just myths around carbs and people really like to villainize them, I think, and they definitely got a bad reputation somewhere along the way, but definitely want to push back on the idea that carbs are the enemy, because I just see so many women in this exact age range chronically under eating carbs, thinking that they're doing the right thing, the healthy thing, and it can really, really backfire in a huge way, because chronic low carb eating it messes with your thyroid function. It can spike your cortisol, it wrecks your sleep. And those are three of like the most important things. And so we want to make sure, and we need to make sure that we are eating enough carbs. And it's probably more than you think that you need, but carbs are really fuel for your nervous system. That's how I like to think about them. They're not just extra calories that you're supposed to feel guilty about after you eat them, because I think a lot of people will just be like, okay, hit your protein mark, and as long as you hit your protein, then you can just like fill your calories and your macros with whatever you want. It doesn't matter if it's carbs or fat or whatever. But I think that is kind of wrong in a sense, because you do need a certain amount of carbs. And so they're not just those extra calories, and you shouldn't feel guilty about them, but your brain runs on glucose, which is carbohydrates, and that is its preferred fuel source. And then your nervous system needs it to function properly. And when you chronically restrict carbs, your body can actually interpret that as a stress signal, almost kind of like a mild ongoing, like there's no food around. And an example that I always like to talk about with this is like, your body does not understand, or your nervous system does not understand, that we are living in 2026 and that there's a McDonald's at every corner, a grocery store at every corner, and that food is in this crazy abundance. It pays attention to what you are feeding it and you are doing. And so if you never eat carbs, that is teaching your body like, oh, she must be in the middle of nowhere and there's no food and there's no fuel around, and every now and then she kills an animal and eats all this protein, but there's no carbs. And so it's going to be like, we are stressed. This is a stressful situation. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's going to start shutting off of some of those processes in your body that are not necessary for survival, because again, it doesn't know that at any moment you could go eat a huge bowl of pasta and be totally fine, right? It doesn't understand that. And so the stress response is often exactly what's kind of driving the fatigue and the anxiety and the hormonal chaos. And you're just trying to fix all of that by cutting carbs in the first place, which is just so backwards. And it really becomes this like ironic loop where you cut carbs to feel better, and then the carb restriction itself becomes a new source of the exact symptoms that you were trying to escape. And I think too, because a lot of women too, I even talked to a lady yesterday that ended up joining the program, and she's like, if I eat carbs, I get like so tired after, so I just don't eat any carbs. And I'm like, well, that's not a reason to avoid carbs. That's a reason to ask a question of like, what's going on? But that just because you get tired after you eat carbs does not mean that you shouldn't be eating carbs. And then also on top of that, kind of going back to the quality, I definitely don't want to be like insinuating that we should be eating unlimited or refined carbs, because that is not the answer either. So we will, like I mentioned, talk about food quality in a minute, and it matters like a lot here. But the blanket idea is essentially that carbs as a category, they're not bad for you, and we need them, especially as women. And that is just how your physiology works. And I do want to just quickly talk about the thyroid mechanism, worth knowing here too. I was trying to remember if we talked about this in the thyroid episode or not. That would have just came out, but your thyroid produces a hormone called T4, but T4 has to be converted into T3. And the active form your cells actually use is that T3. And that conversion process is sensitive to how much you're eating overall and specifically to carbohydrate intake. And so when you are chronically, severely carb restricted, that will reduce that conversion of T4 into T3. And so someone who is doing a very low carb approach for months at a time, especially if she's also stressed and undersleeping, then she might genuinely be working against her own thyroid function without realizing that's what's happening. And so it is a lot of the time a missing piece for women who have had their thyroid labs checked and they've just been told like everything looks normal, but they do still feel exhausted. It's because the labs might be technically in range while that conversion process itself isn't running well. And that's all I'm going to say. You should go back and listen to the thyroid episode if you haven't, because we go much more in depth into that whole process and everything like that. But main takeaway is just like we can't be scared of carbs.
Yeah. And even in like my own application, and I'm sure with you too, is like your body's need for carbs in order to ovulate. It is so important, especially for women, but women are the number one people that cut out carbohydrates. And I also find it interesting in this space. I feel like the functional space, there's been a shift. And I think it comes from a good place of wanting to like balance your blood sugar and lower your insulin levels, et cetera, et cetera. But with that comes a lot of low carb conversation and completely avoiding carbs. And as women, I truly believe that is going to harm us. And we'll talk about, like, I'm sure the keto or whatever, but most people are going to benefit from a balanced diet and whole foods. And that doesn't mean you have to completely restrict any macronutrient. And if that's what you're doing in order to make progress, you're going to cause other issues in your body. Like Lacey said, if you're cutting out carbs to like heal symptoms, you're just going to develop a bunch of other symptoms. And so biggest takeaway once again as we go through this is like balanced diets are the way to go. Eat whole foods, and if you can manage that, you're just setting yourself up for success now in terms of like feeling good, but also in the future.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up even about just like ovulation and healthy, even progesterone, right? And it was obviously I'm on a fertility journey, and so I've been tracking my cycle very diligently. And I don't know if you guys remember, but it was about like 2 months ago where I was just having weird low appetite for the first time in my entire life, and I just could not get the food down. And so I kind of resorted to eating a lot of like very high calorie foods that like were a small amount of volume, so a lot of fat, because we're going to go into that in a minute. But fat is much higher calorie per gram than carbs or protein, so meaning it's much more calorie dense. So things like nuts, right? Like you can eat a handful of nuts and that's 300 calories, or you could eat like 2 cups of rice and that's 300 calories. So that's such a different amount of volume that when I was really in that state where I could not eat, didn't want to eat, I resorted to eating a lot of fat because that was easy for me to get my calories in. And I was like, that's kind of like all in all. But even that cycle where I was struggling, I had like a 45-day cycle total, which for the last 4 years, my cycle has been like 28 to 30 days on the clock around everything. So it's like just me not eating enough calories, pushed my ovulation back by 2 weeks, and even more so not
Wow.
eating, because I technically was kind of eating enough calories. I was really careful with that, but my carbs were way down because I just like couldn't eat it. And so it was just really interesting to see. And then my last 2 cycles where it's funny, I was even telling Jensen this because I randomly tracked my food the other day and I was eating like 24 or 2,500 calories, which is usually I'm about like 2,000 to 2,200 is kind of what I think I'm eating and my goal. And when I tracked, I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy that I'm eating that much food. Also awesome that my body can handle that much food. But what happened was because I got used to eating all of these high calorie foods, then when I could eat carbs again, I was still eating all of these high calorie fats. So I think I was just eating like so much food, but then also eating my carbs. And this past cycle, because I'm taking pretty much my hormones every single day to see where they're at, my progesterone in my luteal phase, which is the progestation hormone. That's a hormone that you need to have a successful pregnancy. If you're having like miscarriages, multiple, it's probably because you're low in progesterone. So you really want that to be high in the second phase of your cycle. And when I was eating those 2,500 calories, for the first time in like the 16 months that I was tracking, my progesterone every single day was like through the roof. Like they stopped tracking it like once it hits 30. And so I was like sealing out every single day. It was like plus 30. And
Oh,
progesterone
that
is
gives
an
me
interesting
chills.
hormone. Yeah, isn't it crazy?
That's
And
crazy.
I'm like kind of getting in the weeds, but whatever.
Yeah.
But progesterone is also like a pulsating hormone. So it is normal when you're in your luteal phase that like you'll have one really high day, and then the next day, depending on like when you pee and when you get your hormones tested, it might be a little bit lower. And then the next day it'll be up, which is how all of my cycles have been. But that last cycle where I was eating the 2,400 calories and really focusing on like quality foods every single day in my whole entire luteal phase, my progesterone was like topped out. So it was like picture perfect cycle. It was actually
Wow.
really crazy cool to see. So slay. But anyways, eat.
That's so cool.
that's
I could
that's the
go on
takeaway.
a tangent with that, but we'll
I
save it
know.
for
No,
a
it's
catch
like
up
it's been really fun,
because
and because it's been fun tracking the cycle and interesting because you really realize, like even when I went on a vacation to Mexico, like just that change in environment and the change in my sleep schedule and the change in what I was eating, like that pushed my ovulation back. And so you really start to learn just how delicate your hormones are and how easily they respond to your daily habits and your daily actions. And so it's just so interesting. But anyways,
so
so
cool.
that's carbs. They're important. Eat them. And then the next part is just like fat, and really fat, I think, is just hormone health, is kind of how I think about it in my brain. And I think it's really also one of the most misunderstood macronutrients of all three, especially for women who are around my age. And we kind of grew up in that era of the low fat diet in the 90s and the 2000s, and fat makes you fat and eat. And every food item started coming out as like no fat, fat
It's
free.
crazy.
And it just messed, I think, so many of those millennial women up, including myself. I can remember that stage of diet culture where I was actually living with Brittany, who's now a coach at Lifestyle U, and my mom came down and she's like, I gotta buy you peanut butter. Like, you guys gotta eat something that was fat. She just looked in our fridge and it was like, no fat, no fat, fat free, fat free, fat free. But dietary fat is required to make hormones, quite literally. And so cholesterol is the precursor to hormone production in our body, and your body uses it to build estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone and cortisol, all of it. And so when someone's been doing that low fat diet for years, maybe you did grow up within that fat-free yogurt and margarine and butter like all of us did, and then you come to us and you've got irregular cycles or symptoms that like scream hormone imbalance, we're never really shocked because your body just hasn't had the raw materials to build hormones with for years, sometimes even decades. And so it's super important that you know that fat does not make you fat, and that phrase just needs to like leave the collective consciousness entirely, because fat makes hormones and we need it. So any other
It's
additional
also just
thoughts
like,
on that?
I think something that we don't talk enough about too is like how important healthy fat is for digestion and regular poops and bile flow. And if you're not having normal digestion, once again, we usually go to like, are you eating enough? Are you eating enough fiber? Another thing we need to think about is, are you eating enough like healthy fats? Omegas obviously are so, so important. Those omega-6 fatty acids. So it's just, yeah, I always think hormones, I always think fat, hormones, carbs, energy, protein, building blocks. That's how my brain like remembers, not
Yeah,
remembers them because I just know it, but like how I
it like
describe them.
associates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, and that's so true. And this is kind of like a little funny detour, but when you do a GI map, which is like the gut test where you have to poop in a carton
French
or
fry
whatever and
container.
send it away. So prior to that test, you actually have to make sure that you eat a certain amount of fat, and it's like, I think it's like 80 to 100 grams or something. It's quite a lot. because we want to see, like, it's a long story, but pretty much if you have a lot of fat in your poop and your stool, then that means there's something going on. But so you have to eat a certain amount just to make sure that we can test for that. But we always get comments, or I've gotten so many, I don't know if you do, and even from my personal experience, but the poop that you take after eating that much fat multiple days in a row, it's crazy. Like, I'm like, if you're ever backed up or you just feel like you need to have a good poop, like, just actually focus on
Yes.
eating healthy fats, and it's crazy. Like, yeah, that's so funny.
I know.
Um,
It's like and just once again, one of those things no one tells you to do. If you go to the doctor and you're like, I'm constipated, they're telling you to take whatever that fiber supplement is that
Metamucil.
they're telling you to take Metamucil. No one's saying, well, are you eating like avocados and nuts and seeds and oils and all of those good things? It's just all about
Well,
fiber, which is
yeah,
obviously
and if you
so
kind of,
important.
yes, because you need fiber as well, but the fat helps the fiber. But it's like when you think about like fatty, like the consistency of like oils or whatever, it kind of makes sense that it like grips everything and like pulls it
Yeah,
through and like help, like it makes sense in my brain that I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense that it would kind of like make you have a better poop
like
and improve your
slippery.
digestion. Yeah, because it's like slippery and like, yeah, and like
It's
nothing
so
sticks
funny.
to it. Like it totally makes sense.
It
Um,
does.
so there's a fun fact. But okay, so now I just want to talk a little bit about like calories per gram that we mentioned quickly, but this is kind of why fat feels a lot different. It's a lot more calorie dense. So each macronutrient has a different amount of calories packed into every gram of it. So protein has 4 calories per gram, about. Carbs also have about 4 calories per gram. And then fat has about 9 calories per gram. So almost more than double. And so the reason that this matters is because it's exactly why a small amount of fatty food can feel so much more caloric and calorically dense than the same size portion of, say, like a piece of fruit or a lean protein. And it's not, again, because fat is bad and that we're scared of calories. It's just math, and it's more energy dense gram for grams. And then this is the part that I think is also just empowering to understand is this is why a small amount of healthy fat can go a long way in a meal. So you don't need like this giant portion of avocado or olive oil or nuts to get like the hormone supporting benefits we just talked about. A little goes a long way further than you think. And it's good news, really. It's not bad news. And so when you think about a serving of fat, I think people will say like the size of your thumb, right? And that is for most things. So when I think of servings, I almost try to do it in like 100 calories is a serving. And I don't know if that's just because I'm used to like how we teach our clients nutrition or
Mhm.
whatever, but like a tablespoon of oil, which is straight fat, is about 100 calories. And so if you like think about the size of your thumb, that makes sense. Same thing with like cheese. It's a very small amount to get that full amount. So did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think the palm conversion is always, like, a good one if you're just getting started, or the hand, so, like, that's a
Yeah.
good rule of thumb fat to use if you need to
Yes.
use that.
But yeah, and then third, just understanding this also helps explain why some of those low calorie processed foods strip out fat just to hit a lower number on the label because they know that's what so many people are obsessed with. And in doing that, they often strip out the exact nutrient that your hormones actually need, which is kind of like a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next, because how much do we actually need of each of these? And I think I'm going to just start with more so like a starting point and not like a super rigid rule, because obviously everyone is different and bio individuality is a real thing. But when it comes to protein, Jensen kind of mentioned this in the beginning, as a floor, and I mean like actual floor, like this is a minimum, is the RDA. So registered dietary amount, or what does the R stand for? Anyways, is the
Required.
R required, is the required daily amount. And they say that's about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're around 68 kilos or 150 pounds, that's about 68 grams of protein in a day as your absolute baseline. And if you're eating like little to no protein, I would start aiming for that. But if you're aiming around that amount already and you're getting that I don't believe, and Jensen doesn't believe, based on what we know and we see, we don't think that's enough. And I more so try to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So I'm a roughly 140 pounds and I try to get 140 grams of protein every single day. What
And
about you,
ideal
Jeb?
body weight. I do the
Yes.
same, like kind of like one, for me, it's like 0.8 to 1 pound I'm happy with. So me being around like 150, I'm not necessarily getting there because it's really hard to get. At one point I was, but I'm happy kind of around that like 135 and up mark. But something to also take into account is if you're doing the 1 pound of body weight, if you are overweight or underweight, you want that to be your ideal healthy, I'd say healthy body weight. So for us, that's kind of like where we're sitting, I would say.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So if you were someone that's overweight, like you're 250 pounds, you don't need to be eating 250 pounds of protein. I kind of think the upper limit for most women is around that 140 mark. I think that's like
Yeah.
a safe place for a lot of people to aim, unless you are a smaller human. But I think if you can get anywhere between 100 and 140 as a very generalized amount for protein, I think that's going to cover it for a lot of us. And to be honest, it's probably around double of what you're eating now, which
Mhm.
seems and can seem a little bit overwhelming. But I will say, after being in this industry and tracking my food for 15 years, I haven't tracked my food in, I mean, I just did the other day randomly, and I will randomly to make sure that I'm eating enough. But even though I'm not tracking protein, I always, always, always weigh my protein sources at every single meal to make sure I'm getting that 100 grams. Because for me, I've never really liked meat. Like growing up, me and my mom were both like, we'd rather be vegetarians. Like my dad would force us to eat it and he'd cook us our little steak, but I never like love it. It's not my favorite part of the meal by any means. And so if I don't weigh it, I find I very easily undershoot. So I'm always weighing like my ground beef, my ground chicken, my mousse, my yogurt, anything that is primarily protein. I weigh it at each meal to make sure that I'm hitting that proper amount. So it doesn't need to be something like, you should just weigh it and it's not a big deal. And I love those reels that are going around right now. It's a little bit of a trend where people like put their protein on their plate and then they put their plate on their scale and then they put their protein on their plate and they just show it took literally 2 seconds to weigh their food.
And
So
people make such a big deal about it.
people make
Like,
such a big deal of it. And me and Zach, we just have two scales in our kitchen. We have one by our fridge, one by our stove. So it's always just there. It's super easy. It's not like this obsessive thing. And it doesn't need to be this obsessive thing either, right? It's just like, I want to make sure my hormones and everything is working good. So I want to make sure that I'm getting enough protein. And yeah. So, anyways, protein, I would say work your way up to 1 pound, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight.
yeah. A lot of pounds and grams and
Yeah.
milligrams and
Yes. And then fat, kind of, I always have in my brain, especially when our clients, no matter your size, or I was going to say age, but that's probably not true. But no matter your size, you want to be getting a minimum of at least 50 grams of fat per day as kind of like your floor for normal hormone production. So that's kind of roughly 20 to 35% of your total daily calories. For most women, you do want to be coming from fat. So depending on how much you're eating overall, obviously, but even if you were like trying to lose weight and you're on this cut, I would not put my fat below 50 grams, because when people are trying to lose weight and they're trying to go on this calorie deficit, a lot of the times fat is the easiest to cut because, like we were talking about earlier, it is the most calorie dense. So it's like, oh, well, if I just don't eat this handful of nuts, that saves me 300 calories instead of completely cutting out my oatmeal with breakfast, which is also 300 calories, right? So it's very easy to just like lower your fat because you don't really necessarily feel it like volume wise, but
yeah.
it's just so, so important. So I personally right now on my fertility journey and I'm aiming to get like 80 to 100 grams of fat, which I think is a lot. I don't necessarily think we need that much, but I think no less than 50. And it's kind of okay to roughly aim to about 20 to 25% of your total daily calories for most. But yeah, any additional thoughts on that, or do
I
you
just feel
agree?
like it'd be helpful. So just for you guys to know, so 50 grams of fat when we're using that like calorie conversion. So 50 grams of fat to get to how many calories that would be, you multiply it by 9. So now we have 450 of our calories if we're hitting that floor towards fat. And then in like Lacey and I's case, let's say we're getting 140 grams of protein, that one you'd multiply by 4. So now we're at 560 grams of protein. And that's just interesting to see. Once again, it really shows the difference in like how many calories per. And so when you add those together, okay, now we're at 1100 calories. If we were hitting minimum, Lacey said she's hitting like 80 grams of fat, but let's say we were doing 50 grams of fat and then 140 grams of protein. Now we're at 1100 calories. And so when we move into our carbs, you'll kind of see what Lacey says and how if you're looking to like set your calories, that's how to reverse engineer it a little bit. But that's getting into the weeds, just so.
Yeah, and it's honestly kind of set me up perfectly because that's exactly what we say usually and help people with when it comes to carbs, because you kind of want to think about it a little bit differently than fat and protein, because it's not really like this hard number that you have to hit, but you almost want to think of carbs as filling in the rest of your day once your protein and fat are in place. And so for like a moderately active woman, that often lands somewhere around 40 to 50% of your total calorie intake would be coming from carbohydrates. But this is the macro that shifts the most based on your activity level and your stress and where you're at in your cycle. So more movement, more stress, more resilience needed, you need more carbs. If you're very sedentary and maybe you're dealing with blood sugar issues, maybe you want to do a little bit less. But this is exactly why carbs get that bio individually treatment more than the other two. And because they take up such a huge part of that percentage, we almost don't have to worry about hitting a minimum amount because we always almost will. So you just want to make sure you're getting enough protein, make sure you're hitting at least 50 grams of fat. And then, like Jensen said, that's about 1100 calories from what we calculated. And so then you're kind of like, okay, I'm a pretty active woman. I'm trying to eat around 2200 calories per day. So that means I have roughly 1100 calories now for carbohydrates, which if we reverse the math, which I'm going to have to pull my
275.
which is about 275 grams of carbs, because all we did there was we took 1100 calories and then we divided by 4, which is how much 1 gram of carb has. And then we have about 275 grams of carbs. So,
which is a lot for like
it's a
most
lot.
people. Like,
Yes,
have
and
fun
even
with
the last
that.
yes.
You're going to enjoy
Even
it.
the last time when I tracked my food and I was eating the 2400 calories, I think I was at like 120 grams of fat and I was at like 200 grams of carbs. And I was like, okay, Lacey, you need to chill out on the nuts and the pumpkin seeds and you need to like eat a little bit more carbs. But I think even again, for me specifically with my background in bodybuilding, I just by default eat a lot of protein and even a lot of, and then I like eat less carbs. And I think that's just like my brain has been there. So now when I seen that reflected back to me after I tracked my food, now even in the last 2 weeks, I've been measuring my carb sources because I tend to under eat on carbs because
Same.
I have had a horrible mindset around carbs for years and years and years and years. But it has been really, really cool to see how well my body does with so much fucking food, because I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, my life could have just been so much easier. But
It's
yeah.
so crazy just like thinking back to how much your body and people's bodies fight them when you're eating so low calorie. And then now, and it doesn't happen overnight, I think is important to mention with Lacey. Like she didn't just start eating this amount of food and all of a sudden it was like she's healed. We talked about this one in her story podcast where it was like she ate that amount of food and then she gained the weight, and now we've done the deeper work and we're making sure it's good quality food, and now you're able to handle like 2400 calories is actually absurd. I think about back to the time when you visited me in Van after Mexico and we're like, okay, we're going to do a little bit of a cut, and you had to drop your food to like 1600 calories and it wasn't budging at all. I'm like, that is so crazy. And you were probably weighed a lot more than you do now.
and way
at
more
that
active.
point. Yeah.
Way more active, running fucking marathons, like, which is it's
Yes.
just crazy when you, and I think too, it definitely goes to show of just the quality of food does matter, which I do get into in a minute, because obviously we're just talking about protein, carbs, and fat and just hit those metrics. But I do eat quite clean
Clean.
compared to most. And what I mean by that is it's just like 95% of my diet when I'm at home is whole foods. Am I a crazy person when I go out? No, I eat whatever I want, but it took time to get to that. And then I think another part that I always just like to share is I have a lot of muscle on my frame. And the cool thing about muscle is you burn more calories just existing, just laying in your bed, just sitting here recording this podcast. If you have never strength trained, I am burning quite a bit more calories than you just at rest. And so that's another benefit to just getting jacked. But I
Building
think
muscle.
when people look at me, you know what I mean? I might not look like I have a ton of muscle, but I am pretty dense.
Yeah.
Pretty dense.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So yeah, so to kind of just summarize that, protein and fat have real floors that you should not go under. And it is super important that you hit that minimum metric. Carbs are a little bit more flexible piece that kind of adjust around your actual life. But if none of that sticks, that's kind of okay too. It's exactly why tracking for a season of your life can just be so beneficial, which I'm going to talk a little bit about at the end, but it's going to just teach you so much better than I could ever teach you on this podcast. So I just think it's like one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk about kind of blood sugar regulation. And we actually had a client Win come in the channel the other day, and it was just saying something simple about the way that we get our clients to eat. She's just like, oh, this just like makes so much sense of just eating balanced meals and how much better that I eat, and or how much better that I feel. And that's really all that it's about. It's about eating the 3 macronutrients consistently at every meal throughout the day in a balanced amount. And when you do that, your body is happy. And so when you eat carbs all by themselves, we kind of sometimes call those naked carbs. So that just means like no protein or fat alongside them. Your blood sugar does spike quickly. And then what goes up quickly comes down quickly too. And that crash that you experience after eating carbs all by themselves is where the cravings come from. It's where the sudden fatigue or like energy crashes come from, their irritability, that like 3 p.m. wall that we all hit. That is usually because of that blood sugar spike. And the same too, if you feel like you need a nap after you eat a lot of carbs or whatever, it's probably because you weren't eating them with the right things. And so carbs do that, where protein and fat actually slow down digestion. So they are going to blunt the blood sugar spike. They smooth out that curve, and they're not extra additions to a meal that you throw in if you feel like it. They are what kind of like bears that load of the blood sugar spike. And so they're actually doing structural work every single time that you eat. And the part that matters the most is those blood sugar roller coasters, day after day, meal after meal. They drive cortisol dysregulation, and your body treats a blood sugar crash as a small emergency. And then it releases cortisol to bring your blood sugar back up. And then chronically elevated or dysregulated cortisol that's going up and down all day because you just keep eating these naked carbs, that makes almost everything on your symptom list worse. The bloating, the weight loss resistance, the fatigue, the hormone mess, the sleep issues, like it is all connected to that one mechanism. And it's can be playing out multiple times a day, every day for years. And eventually that is going to lead to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, whatever
Metabolic
it is. But
disease.
yeah. Yeah. So it's not really I don't want to like scare people, and it's not like pre-diabetic, and you don't need to wear like a CGM, like a continuous glucose monitor or anything like that, although they can be helpful. It's just really like a baseline that you need to know that every single body benefits from blood sugar stability. And every one of you that's listening to this, regardless of your health status, will benefit from eating in a way that keeps your blood sugar steady. And so that's why every single one of our clients that come into our programs, they are eating 3 meals a day with a protein source, a carb source, a fat source, and then they might have 1 or 2 snacks in there as well, depending on just how many calories they're eating. Usually 1 snack that is also centered around protein and fat, and then maybe a little bit of carbs. But it's like just focusing on that is going to do so much for just how you feel on a day-to-day basis.
No, it's really crazy how much of a difference that makes, and, like, when people start eating like that, it's an immediate change in how you feel throughout your day and your hormones and everything, and I think the one thing that maybe we missed with that is also with the protein, carb, and fat, there's a fiber. Bonus points, if you can make your carbohydrate also a fiber source, then that's going to help even more, and what I mean by that is if you and we don't only want to get carbs that have a fiber source, but the things like the quinoa, oats, berries, those are all going to also, they're a carbohydrate, but they also have fiber. And so that's what we call that like low glycemic fiber source and carb source compared to a high glycemic carb source, which would be simple syrup that they put in your coffee, essentially, which is going straight into your bloodstream. And everyone reacts differently. But the baseline is, like Lacey said, if you can pair your carb, no matter what the carb is, with protein, protein, fat, fiber, even one of them, then you're just in such a better place. If you already have things like insulin resistance, PCOS, any kind of like metabolic type 2, prediabetes, whatever it might be, I do think it's something you need to get extremely serious about, is not having any of those, what Lacey mentioned again, those naked carbs, so carbs alone, and just get into that habit, because that's when you're trying to reverse something, and that's when you do need to be serious, and hopefully down the road you can be a little bit more flexible with it. But when I found out I had PCOS, that was something I was extremely, and I already was, because like Lacey has said, with the bodybuilding background, you just eat that way regardless, but it's something I just didn't mess around with, especially like the coffee on the empty stomach. So although we preach flexibility, this is something you really do need to be serious with if you are at that stage. If you're not at that stage, it's nothing you need to stress about, because your body's designed to balance your blood sugar on your own to an extent, right? And so just, if you're at that place, be rigid. If you're not, just eat balanced
Yeah.
meals.
Yeah. And I think it's good to kind of start developing that identity of you are someone who doesn't eat carbs all by themselves, because it's like when I see someone, and this is probably not healthy, but like if I see someone just order a bagel and nothing else, like I could never imagine in my life doing that, except for maybe if I'm like New York City and there's like cream cheese, obviously.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like I never ever think about that. It's like protein is always number one on my list. And I think I did share this on the podcast. It was a while ago though, of just seeing and noticing how much my like thought process has changed around the way that I think about calories in food now, because now I don't look at I'm trying to think of something that's like really high carbs, like a piece of cake, we'll say, and like, oh, I can't eat that because it's too much calories. I think, oh, I need to eat a piece of protein first so I can eat that piece of cake. And that's just
And then
like
go
where
for a
my
walk
brain has changed.
afterwards.
And then go for a walk after. So you also stunt that blood sugar. So it's like, there's nothing wrong with like thinking and having that identity. And it is how we are supposed to eat. And so if you can kind of just start, it doesn't mean we don't get to eat carbs and that we have to be scared of carbs and we never get to have cake again. It just means if you want to have cake, have dinner first and then eat your cake. Like that's all that it is. And so it's like, it is good to start forming that identity where it's like, it's kind of crazy to just like eat a bagel in the afternoon with no protein on it or whatever. And the other cool thing that I didn't mention as well as why you should be incentivized to eat carbs with protein and fat is because protein and fat is slower to digest. It also keeps you fuller, makes you fuller, and keeps you fuller for longer. So then you prevent overeating of the carbs and everything like that. And so that's why if you've ever had like a pancake and syrup breakfast, by 10 o'clock, you're starving and you're exhausted. And that's because that was straight carbs. You got this huge spike and then you went down. Versus if you have a savory breakfast, you feel great. You have no crash. Your brain is like on fire and you're not hungry until lunch. And so it's like, that's like the easiest is if you start your day with a sugary breakfast, man, just changing that one thing is going to be like a complete game changer. I always think of Brittany's mom, she's a coach on our team now. And her mom did one of our challenges and that was like her main takeaway. And she's just like, I can't believe how much energy I have when I have a savory breakfast. Like it just can be such a game changer for people that people don't even think about, right? And so yeah.
Well, even I had a client the other day and I was looking at her food log and she went to McDonald's because she was on a road trip and she was like, I went for the muffin because it was like bran or whatever it is. And I'm like, honestly, you would be better off getting a chicken wrap in that situation. Like, I would way rather you, even though it's probably less calories. You get 2 chicken wraps for the amount of calories that comes in this like quote unquote healthy muffin that just has oats in it, but it also has 30 grams of sugar. But, and this isn't like from a judgmental place because this is how people think, right? It's like, oh, muffin, oat, healthy. When it's like muffin, carb, only carb, maybe a little bit of fiber in there. Whereas if you have the 2 chicken wraps for the exact same, especially if it's grilled, now you have protein, carb, fat. Is it the best source? Are we saying go to McDonald's and eat chicken wraps? No, but once you start to change your way of thinking, like it really makes the world of a difference in how you feel. And like Lacey said, having that identity of like, I'm someone that eats protein, carb, fat isn't a bad thing. It's not toxic. It is going to make you feel so much better and live a long, healthy life.
Yeah, 100%. So, anyways, the last kind of part I want to talk about, I think, is before we just go into some actionable takeaways, is just why it's not just about hitting your macros, and talk a little bit about whole foods versus processed foods, because me and Jensen both fell victim to the if it fits your macros lifestyle. And all we focused on for about 5, 6, 7 years was just making sure that we got enough protein, enough carbs, enough fat, enough fiber. And it did not matter how we got to those numbers. It was just like, as long as we hit them. And so what did I do? We filled our macros with a whole bunch of low quality, shitty, ultra processed foods that also were low calorie because we were eating low calorie. And well, 6 years later, and an autoimmune disease and diarrhea and stubborn body fat, you kind of realize that that's not the way that it is. And so, you could hit your macros perfectly every single day down to the exact gram, and you could still be making yourself sick. And it's just something that is really important to understand about your body, because I think so many of us do just focus on like hitting your protein, hitting your carb, hitting your fat targets every single day using ultra processed foods. And you might still be missing the things, you are missing the things that your body needs to actually thrive. And so, like let's say someone's protein target for the day is met with a protein bar, which has a whole bunch of like sugar alcohols in it, artificial sweeteners. And then their carbs come from like a cereal that's technically like fortified but stripped of fiber. And then fat comes from like seed oils in a frozen meal. Like on paper, on an app, on a macro tracker, that day is going to look perfect. The numbers match the targets, you're killing it, right? But what the day is missing is fiber to feed your gut microbiome, actual vitamins and minerals like magnesium and zinc and B vitamins and vitamin C, and all these things that our body needs as cofactors to actually use these macronutrients that you just ate. You're also going to lack like antioxidants to manage the oxidative stress and inflammation that ultra processed food itself can generate. And you're probably also getting a dose of preservatives, emulsifiers, additives that your gut and your liver now have to process and deal with it. And so, yes, on paper, macros, perfect, cool, but your actual health, not so much. Because again, macros, how I always like to think about it is macros tell your body how much fuel and how much building blocks that it has. But whole, minimally processed foods are what determines how well your body can actually use those building blocks, and how much inflammation that you're creating in the process, and what your gut microbiome looks like 6 months or a year down the line. And so obviously I never want to like turn this podcast into like, just hit your protein number and you're good, right? Like that's not root cause functional health, and that's not what we're about. It's just a new version of like counting your calories with extra steps. But at the end of the day, like the quality of your food matters. Yeah, it's just more work. And we probably maybe will do just a podcast on like micronutrients, minerals, and vitamins, because we're obviously think that those are really important. But it's just like my story is picture perfect as to why if it fits your macros does not work and does not matter, because that's what I did my whole entire bodybuilding career down. Like I weighed my spinach, you guys. Like when I say I was hitting my macros perfectly, I was hitting them perfectly, but I still lost my period for 3 years, or it was irregular, developed an autoimmune disease, bloated 24/7. And it's like your body is not functioning or working optimally with that. So what
I
is
think
the
that's the
saying? I can't even, you go ahead.
think of your saying while I say this, but I think that's the confusing thing too, is like you can look better and you can make progress when you track your macros. And that's where it's very confusing, I think, for people, because someone online might show that they track their macros perfectly and they have six-pack abs and defined arms and are super lean, and they say they're eating 2,000 calories, but they could be having acne and irregular digestion and feel like crap and be relying on 0-calorie energy drinks to get through their workout and their day, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's one of those situations where like aesthetics doesn't always match overall health. And that's the case a lot of the times, because if you are a female and you are very low body fat percentage when you're not meant to sit at that low body fat percentage, that isn't health. Aesthetically, it might be pleasing to people online, but it's just something you need to think about too, is like someone can look healthy and they might be tracking their macros. It doesn't mean that they are actually healthy from within, as cliche as it sounds.
Well, and that's exactly like my story. I had freaking
Yeah.
6-pack abs, but at home I was bloated and my stomach was like looked 6 months pregnant. But as soon as I got to
Yeah.
the gym, I sucked that shit in. And every picture I took, I sucked it in. And then you can see the inflammation and the bags under my eyes that again is easy to remove from like a picture that I post on
Yeah.
Instagram. I had diarrhea. I didn't have a period. I was like, so it's like that's exactly what I was doing. And I think too, what's important is like it does work until it doesn't. And in
Mhm.
the first time I ever tracked my macros after never tracking or never understanding or not even knowing what protein, carbs, and fats did or were, yeah, I lost weight. I felt great. It was the first time in my life that I actually ate enough protein and ate enough carbs and ate enough fat and had those balanced meals. But it worked until slowly my body realized like, oh, we're not getting any nutrients. I don't really even know what this food is that she's eating. Like, what is this Walden Farms fucking fake syrup? Like, and then over time you start to develop symptoms. And so you might have a friend that's like eating all this ultra processed foods and hitting their macros and they're feeling great and looking great. Cool for now. Like it's
Yeah.
only a matter of time. And you really have, I don't think, any idea how good you can feel until you feel as good as you can.
Great.
And so I think a lot of the times we convince ourselves that we feel good because we feel better than we did, but it doesn't mean that there's not more room to grow. And I think
Yeah.
too, something that's always important to remember is if you're changing your lifestyle and you're already not tracking, you have no idea what protein, carbs, and fats are, you eat out a lot, you have lots of ultra processed foods in your diet, if for the next 3 months all you focus on and is hitting your macros, great. That is a
Yeah.
huge step in the right direction. And then once that's easy and you kind of realize, like, okay, protein is this and fat is this and carb is this, now I'm going to start focusing on micronutrients and swapping out and switching it for more whole foods. Like, you don't have to drastically change your lifestyle overnight, and it never works and you'll never be successful if you try to do it. So it is okay to take steps, but
Yeah.
don't do what I did and stay on the ultra processed macro tracking only step for 7 or 8 years until your whole entire health is crumbling and you have a 7-year healing journey ahead of you. Like, you don't want to wait that long, but but it's okay. But
But it was a
yeah.
crucial step, but we're
So
here to make sure that you don't stay in that step as long as we did.
exactly. Okay, so I just got a quick little rule for you guys as like an actionable takeaway so that you can leave this episode with kind of like a list of things that you're supposed to remember, but you have no idea how to actually do it. So this is what I call the 3-3-3 plate method. So step 1, before you eat, like even just try this for the next week. Before you eat, just glance down at your plate and ask yourself, do I have a protein, a carb, and a fat here? If one's missing, your blood sugar is at risk. You might have a crash. You're going to feel like crap, right? So just start becoming aware of what you're eating. And again, it's easy for us to say this because I know I could list 15 good protein sources, 15 good fat sources, 15 good carb sources. So this is why, again, it always goes back to just like track your food and take 6 months to learn about nutrition and hire us and we'll teach you. But
Yeah.
that's step 1. Look at your plate. Do you have one of each? Either yes or no. Step 2, you don't need like an app or a food scale even for this. You can use your hands. So a palm-sized portion of protein, a fist-sized portion of carbs, and then a thumb-sized portion of fat. That's it. that can be your whole entire system. And you can do that anywhere, even at a restaurant, at your friend's house, wherever. And then step 3 is just notice for 3 days. Don't overhaul your whole entire life. Just notice your energy, your cravings, your bloating, your mood when all 3 macros are actually present at your meals. So let your own body show you the pattern. And your body has been trying to tell you this stuff for years. This is just the first time that you're listening. And so pay attention, because that will make it more worth it for you to stay consistent with it when you're actually observant of how your body is feeling. And something that I genuinely believe, and I don't say this lightly, is I think, again, and I just kind of mentioned this, but take 6 months and just track your macros. And
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be forever. It's not a diet. It's just literally as education. You don't even have to change anything that you're eating. But by doing that, you're going to learn what foods, because chicken is straight protein, but beef has protein and fat in it. And avocado is mostly fat, but it also has carb, and it might even have a gram of protein. It's kind of confusing, but just by tracking for 6 months, you're going to learn so much about food. And the one excuse that so many, especially moms, use is, I don't want to track in front of my kids because I don't want them to grow up with a toxic thing, toxic mindset around food. Tracking food is whatever you make it. If you make it toxic, it's toxic. If you say, oh, this is an awesome tool, so I make sure that I'm eating enough and that I can be really strong so I can be the best mom for you, and that's what you tell your kid, they're not going to create this warped image of what food and dieting is. They're not. And to be honest, they should fucking track their foods for 6 months too at a certain point. Everyone should do it, and they might not have to if you do it and then you show them proper portion sizes and proper balanced meals for their entire life. But I just think that excuse is making so many moms stay stuck because they think it's so toxic and they have so much shame around it that they don't want to put that in front of their kids. But that's all you. That is all you, and you are projecting that onto them, and they do not have that interpretation of it. I weigh my food in front of my nieces and nephews all of the time, and they don't think that I have some toxic relationship, because my only answer is, oh, I just make sure I'm eating enough because I want to make sure I can grow big muscles. That's what I say. And they're not
exactly.
Auntie Lacey's on a toxic diet and she's I hate myself. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. Now I need to eat low calorie. The reason why we get like that is because our parents were like that, but our parents weren't tracking their food, making sure they get enough protein, fat. They were like, I need to eat no fat. Carbs are the devil. Sugar is horrible for you. And I need to go on Jenny Craig. Yeah. That's not what we're saying do here. We're saying just measure your food so you can make sure you're getting enough food in. And if you explain that to them, because kids aren't stupid, they're going to actually get a lot from that, I think.
Yeah, because it's not coming from a restrictive mindset. It's coming from abundance. I need to make sure I'm eating enough, right? It's not, oh, I don't want to overeat because I'm scared I'm going to get fat, so I need to weigh every single thing down to my spinach out. It's no, that's why I still eat my protein, because if I didn't, I know I would end up under eating. That's just who I am. So literally 12 years into tracking my food, I still weigh my protein. It's whatever you make it. So
exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, that's it. Bye. I'm just kidding.
I feel like that was a very useful episode. So
yeah, it was kind of fun just prepping for it, because I feel like it's been a while since I just talked about macros. And now even after we've gone through it, I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about a few things. But hopefully that you guys just found it useful as a little bit of an introduction to nutrition and the basics of nutrition. But again, as awesome as this podcast was, you'll learn so much more by just tracking your own food for 6 months.
Yeah. And hiring us.
Yeah. And hiring us, because we're the best.
Link in show notes.
Link in show notes. Okay. Well, anything else, Jeb?
No, that was great. I hope everyone got a lot out of that. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And by any of us, I would actually direct you to my Instagram, because your message is probably going to get lost in Lacey's.
I'm pretty famous now, you guys. So
or the wellness effect.
Do the wellness effect. Yeah. Or Jeb. I'm not going to take that away from Jensen, but
no, I don't need
not
it.
Answer you. She doesn't need you to message her, but if you do, she'll answer.
Yeah. But the wellness effect is a good.
Good way.
Good option. All right.
Okay, team. Well, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and also challenge your friends if anyone ever says weighing your food is toxic. Challenge them. Ask them why they think that.
Yeah.
And talk to you later. Ring the bell. Bye.
Bye.